And I'm going to just kind of jump right in it because we might have a long day. So I want to kind of get into, and this is really like a class today, more than just a talk. So I want to start our little class, which we talked about this at the general sales meeting, at the annual sales meeting, but I want to pick back up on this topic. I think I'm sharing. Okay, now I'm sharing, right?
Yes.
Okay, so today we have a couple of topics, the foremost being core competency, okay? And we talked about this a little bit, but the state, the real estate commission, the courts, and everyone are making this to be a big deal. And so I'm making it into a big deal because primarily as the broker, I am responsible for your actions, and I have responsibilities under the law. In the law of the state of Texas, I am required to teach you these things and hold you accountable for a certain number of things. So in the property code and in the real estate code, it requires me to ensure that you are competent and that you have core competency in what it is that you do. And I've tried to make it clearer and clearer and clearer that we do not do all things. We are really focused in what it is that we do, and we're really good at what it is that we do. And what we are not good at, we need to not do at all. And the law is pretty clear that if we try to do those things, that we're putting ourselves, our fiduciary, our want and desire to make money over the interest of our client. It's like, I'm licensed in Texas, I can sell a house in Beaumont, except I don't know shit about Beaumont, and I cannot possibly do a good job for any client that I would try and represent in Beaumont. And the law is clear that when I attempt to go sell a house in Beaumont, I'm putting my interest ahead of my client's interest. I did not well represent my client. It's like a doctor. If you're a heart specialist, then you don't go operate on people's toes. It's just there's a competency that they have and a license that they have, and we're the same way. And our primary responsibility and competency is in the sale of single-family residential real estate in the greater Houston area. That's what we do, and we should not do things that we do not know how to do. But they're getting more and more particular about these things. So it's not just geography anymore. And they lay out these 4 areas that we need to be competent in. And one is just the market conditions. And the market conditions could be Westbury versus Cyprus. They're totally different. That is like going from Spain to France. They may have some similarity, but in reality, they are vastly, vastly different. And you may be totally competent in Cyprus and not remotely knowledgeable about what happens in Westbury. And we need to make sure that you understand your limitations, and geography is one of those things, but it's basically the local issues, and that are you using good judgment whether or not you can adequately advise your client. And I'm going to be as firm as I possibly can be, because I am going to send your license back, because I do not want the liability if you engage in real estate of which you are not competent. Now, I don't expect you to be competent in everything, and someone else in the firm may be competent, and I'm pretty competent in a number of things, not just one. And so you can sell in Deborah Sulak can sell in Westbury just fine. She's just going to need to rely on someone else in the firm to help her. That may be me, that may be Rhonda, that may be Wendy, that may be someone who sold 30 houses in Westbury. So we will partner with you to help you sell in an area that you are not maybe the foremost expert in, but someone in the firm is an expert in. You must ask for some help in some of these areas. And then there's clearly areas that we are not competent. Look, we are not commercial real estate agents. I know we'd like to think that we are, and we'd love to go sell these things, but literally the rules change all the time. And if it's close to the heights and it's something that you partner with me on, we're happy to do it. But look, we don't know how to sell the corner of Westheimer and Montrose. And maybe you could sell it for $27 million to a Japanese conglomerate, and that would be lovely, except we are not competent in that. We are barely competent enough to sell an unrestricted house on Heights Boulevard that could be converted into some other use. Well, and I think we have to be clear about this. It is very, very confusing to people. They do. A, I don't think my agents understand, but B, I think the consumer doesn't understand. I had a 50-minute conversation with Cynthia's client who has a bungalow on 20th Street trying to convert to a State Farm agency. It ain't that easy. He has spent a very long time trying to figure out the permitting, trying to figure out the occupancy, trying to figure out the setback. Now he has to go back and replat, and he didn't understand that he had to replat, and there's a cost to replat, and he didn't know he had to replat before he bought it. And these are things that we need to make sure that we explain to people along the way. And I'm not saying Cynthia couldn't sell a bungalow on 20th Street to someone who wanted to convert it to State Farm, but I'm just saying there's inherent risk. And when these things get complicated, the first thing people do is sue. I mean, and they sue over money. They sue because there was a delay. We should have been competent to tell them about these delays. We should have, whatever it is, they get angry and they look to someone to pay. And that someone to pay is generally me. It's really not even you so much as it is me. So I need us to be very careful about what we do. The firm, no one in the firm is overly competent with contracts that go beyond this 1 to 4 resale contract. I mean, that's what our core competency is in that. We stretch ourselves for new condominium construction or new home incomplete or new home complete. But I mean, you're going to need to ask for help in those instances. And let's be clear about this. Every instance that it's not a promulgated form, I need for you to seek help on. We are not experts in Meritage's contract, Perry Homes contract, In-Town Homes contract, D.H. Horton's contract, Trendmaker's contract, and those contracts fundamentally give the advantage to the person who promulgated the form, the person who prepared the form. They prepared them on their behalf. They are not neutral. They are not vetted. There's not a broker lawyer committee that's saying that they're fundamentally equal. And they're not fundamentally equal. They favor the person that wrote the contract, typically the builder, developer, or some other instance there. And we need to be able to explain that. And we are not good at telling our clients, you really need to seek the professional advice of an attorney, because we are guilty many times of practicing law and giving legal advice that we should not be giving. We need to be more careful of these instances. And it's a simple thing. It's just writing something in special provisions. The effective date will be 5 days from today. No, that by law, you can't write that. That's practicing law. When the form tells you when the effective date is, the courts have ruled when you write that in there, you are practicing law, and that is illegal and will cause you to lose your license and will cause me to have a violation against me at TREC. So we need to be very careful what we write in special provision. Now, if you're instructed or your client writes it in there, they can write what they want to write sometimes that we don't necessarily have to agree with, but we need them to seek the advice of an attorney. And I mentioned this, and those of you that are new, we have a slew of attorneys. I mean, Boulevard Realty, to run a business today, you got to have a trademark lawyer, you got to have an errors and omissions lawyer, you got to have a civil litigator, you got to have a wide variety of lawyers. We have a slew of lawyers. None of our lawyers can represent any of our buyers and sellers. They only represent us. Our lawyers cannot give advice to our seller or to our buyer. Your buyer or your seller at that point has to seek the advice of an attorney that represents them. And be clear, our lawyers cannot represent the people that we represent. They don't represent them. They only represent Boulevard Realty, and they can't give them advice. They're prohibited from giving them advice. That what they can say is, you need to seek the advice of an attorney. No one wants to seek the advice of an attorney because it costs money, and delays. But we need to be better in the habit of saying these sort of things and explaining it as much as we can. But we need to be competent. And I mean, I am pulling these pages from the broker responsibility classes that I have to take and pass. And it tells you, look, if you were new, Jonah, you are not competent enough to sell a $5 million house in River Oaks. That is not your core competency. You will need help from us to sell a $5 million house. And so it's talking price range, geography. We are not short sale specialists. We are not foreclosure specialists. We are not relocation specialists by any means, although we have probably done 1,000 relocation transactions. We must stop and reevaluate every instance there to see if we are the best fit for that particular buyer or seller going through a relocation. So, I mean, when these things are beyond the resale of a 1 to 4 residential single family home in the greater Houston area, we need to think, is this our core competency, or what do I need? What additional training, advice, or partnering will I need in order to successfully represent our clients, which is our number one responsibility, is to ensure that our clients are getting the very best representation. And if they're not getting the best representation, we need to back off and let them hire someone who will give them the best advice and representation that they can get. And sometimes that is in the form of a referral fee, and sometimes it's just passing. We just are going to get to pass on a few of these things. You cannot be all things to all people or whatever. And so I'm highlighting all of these sort of things to make sure that you understand I'm not just making this stuff up. I mean, it specifically is telling you that you are comfortable in a certain price range. I'm trying to even be clear at these open houses. I told Lauren the other day, it took me 11 and a half years of practicing real estate, where I was a top producer at Houston Business Journal all through the early 2000s, selling $30 million worth of houses. But my average price was between $250,000 and $500,000. Took me 11 years to sell a $2 million house. And I had sold 70 houses a year for those 10 years. It just incrementally, that's what it took. Today, you guys are richer than I was back then, and you're more connected than I was. And so you're going to do it faster than I did. And the firm is better positioned to help you in those things also. But there is a limit, and there is a geography, there is a price point, there is a certain type of structure that we're well equipped to help with, and there are areas that we're not well equipped to help in, and we need to make sure that that is our basic responsibility. And I mean, it tells me things that I need to go teach you. My responsibility as the broker is to make sure that we're reviewing your contracts, that they're compliant. Look, Sandra gets paid to review contracts. Do not blame her because you didn't do it right. That's her job, to ensure that we have done them right before everyone gets paid. Once you get paid, it's hard as hell. She has 200 forms that she needs after the closing, and we beg and beg and beg for them, and we'll probably not get many of them. I'm never really that much of a hard ass, but the thing to do is make sure that you just don't get paid till we get these forms. And the time to get forms, guys, is in the beginning. I can't make Greenwood King or some buyer or some seller sign a form the day before closing. I can just mark the file that they refuse to sign the form, and that's the note I'm going to remember when we get sued 2 years later. When we get sued, it's rarely in the middle of a transaction. It is almost always significantly later. Almost every lawsuit we've ever been in, it's been from an agent that did something 2 to 3 years later, and now there's a repercussion. Something that comes up, a defect that comes up, something that someone said and that it changed in the neighborhood or it changed about the house. I mean, my biggest lawsuit to date was over someone in my first year that told someone a wall wasn't a load-bearing wall. And in fact, 3 years later, when they got their architect and started their addition, it was a load-bearing wall. Immediately, The house was about $500,000. Immediately, the lawsuits are for multi-million dollars. They would have never bought that house. I had to pay for their architect fees. I needed to pay to buy the house back. I needed to buy their new house. I needed to pay for their move, all because an agent allegedly said this wall isn't a load-bearing wall. And that lawsuit was about 2.5 years of me arguing. And the damn agent didn't even work for me anymore, for God's sake. He worked for Berkshire Hathaway. So I'm having to still defend myself, spend money for some lawsuit for some agent that left me. But that's the way it works. I mean, that's the sheer reality of typical lawsuits. It's basically over these sort of things. So never underestimate what you might get sued for, what I might get sued for. But where I see and that's probably not a great example. It's just an example of frustration that I have of stupid lawsuits. But it's where I see more and more things happening is in today's environment. And we're going to talk specifically about that, which is all of these situations when the market is extremely hot, okay? And it is extremely hot in many areas, which opens us up for tremendous liability, no matter what side we're on. And look, the world is fragile. Every buyer is totally convinced they're overpaying, and every seller is totally convinced they can get more or don't have to do anything, okay? So every seller is having seller's remorse. If I had just waited 3 more months, I could have made more money. Or, the buyer, same thing. If I wait till the market cools down, I wouldn't have to overpay this much or be in this bidding war, whatever. And the lawsuits are going to happen. There's no doubt they're going to happen. And they tell us because the lawsuit companies, the legal companies are feeding the internet with these ideas of where the real estate agent who made money in any of those scenarios, representing a buyer where there's a bidding war or seller where there's a bidding war, you made more money when there was a bidding war than when there was not a bidding war. And that you may be making more money than they do. They may inherently be losing money in some scenario. And they're talking about our responsibilities. We've made it clear, if you represent a seller, you must leave that house on the multiple listing service for 72 hours before you can take an offer. You cannot allow your client to take an offer without me having a thorough conversation. Classic example, I may be wrong a little bit on Drew's deal, but he had a deal. We had an offer. It was $50,000 over the asking. They said they were more than happy. They were just as overjoyed as they could possibly be. Please let us sign the deal. And I wouldn't let them sign the deal, although I can't stop them from signing the deal. But I mean, I've spoken to them, I was blue in the face. And lo and behold, we got another 30 or 40,000 more than that by waiting 24 hours. Now, while they were in love with the $50,000 increase, you know what they were more in love with? An $80,000 increase. By waiting 24 hours, they made an extra $30,000. And it happens all the time in my world, all the time. And they're only happy with $50,000 until they have a higher option. And many people are going to see, it happens in my world. I have done it myself. Joe Blow, real estate agent, accepts some offer. And immediately the buyer or the disgruntled agent goes to that seller, knocks on the door and says, did your agent tell you that I offered $100,000 more than that and I was just waiting to get my offer in writing to them in an hour? They knock on the door all the time and do that. I knocked on the door on Judith Friedman's door one day when she screwed me over on a deal just like that. And you know what Judith never did? That again, because it leaves you open for liability. You advised your client to take some offer and they could have made more money. So are you acting as your fiduciary or is their fiduciary when there's some bidding war scenario? And it works just the same way. And they're telling you, there's commercials out there. Did your agent have you overpay in a bidding war? Call this number or email us so that we can, and they're going to go after plenty of real estate agents that told their client on a listing that was worth $450 that listed for $500 and you told them to go offer $550. They only offered $550 because you told them to offer $550. And when they hire a lawyer, and the lawyer asked for all the contracts that were offered on that house, and they're under deposition over there, and all the other offers were 450 and your offer was 550, and you're on the stand and the judge is asking you, under what scenario did you think that that was worth 550? Your core competency is going to come into question. And were you acting in the best interest? Now, it's a fine line. I'm just pointing these things out here because I need for you to, first of all, just be aware of these situations. I'm not saying that we don't have to offer 550 on that house in order to get it. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you're going to be under a tremendous amount of scrutiny to be able to justify the actions. And foremost, what they're going to ask, were you acting in your client's best interest? Is that in your client's best interest? And believe me, I've made a living telling my clients not to buy some stupid house that I thought was bad, in the wrong location, or overpriced. And if they would wait, 30 more days, they might get a better house in a better location for a lesser amount of money. It's timing. This wave shall to pass. It is not always going to be this sort of seller's market, and it will flip. And it doesn't take long to see these things. I see it all over. My client was interested in 4 houses I mentioned the other day in Royal Oaks. Every one of those houses is $200,000 less than what they sold in 2015. You know what they did? Overpaid in 2015. That's the sheer market. I mean, look, I'm looking at this house on Ingold or whatever in Southgate or whatever. They paid $1.95 million for it. They renovated it totally, and my clients are going to probably get it for $2.1 million. Those people are going to lose how much? Several $100,000. My seller at 1035 Harvard, you can follow the numbers, paid $2.55 million for that house, spent $400,000 on doing additional work to it, and we're selling it for $2,350,000 with 6% commission. He's losing right at $700,000 in the hottest real estate market, in the hottest real estate area in the city. He's losing $700,000. I didn't represent him when he bought the stupid house. He overpaid when he bought it. There's no doubt he overpaid when he bought it. And I think we could have I'm the second realtor. Thank God. The first one, was the kiss of death over here. You want to be the second one sometime. But I mean, you just have to be careful that of these deals. When people start losing hundreds of thousands of dollars and they glance up and they see the realtors made $120,000, that's what they're going to go look at and say, who profited the most from my transaction? And in many cases, it is the real estate agent or whatever. Here's another one. You're advising them to have a 5-day option period and pay $1,000 or $10,000 or whatever you're offering it, for the option fee in order to make it enticing. I'm not saying that's a bad strategy, but if they do not have enough time to do their due diligence and they cannot get the inspectors that would have been normal for that transaction, and they end up buying a house and there's some defect later, there is no doubt, there is no doubt in my mind that they're going after the real estate agent. There is just no doubt in my mind. You told them how many days, you told them how much, you gave them the advice of which inspectors, you probably even called the damn inspectors for them half the time. And then a defect comes up, of course they're going to go after the real estate agent. That is a no-brainer. So I need for you to understand that if you offer a 10-day option period and the other side comes back at 3 and the buyer understands that deal, and that's a different scenario. That's you negotiating. Your best interest was to try and get them as much amount of time as possible. When the other side forced them to choose 3 days, and then the liability shifted over to the other side. So sometimes be mindful of what it is that you're doing. I'm not saying, because we've all told you, Rhonda and I both are telling you, sometimes to make the option period smaller will help get your contract accepted. There's no doubt. And if that's the most important thing, but line up these inspections. And look, just because your option period is 5 days or 7 days doesn't mean you can't continue to inspect afterwards. I mean, you may not have the unrestricted right to terminate, but I mean, I would still make sure that you're doing your due diligence to offer your clients the best advice that they can. And if they're buying an expensive house, and expense is relative, $500,000 is a lot of money to some people, and they couldn't get the roofer out in the option period, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't get the roofer out. They need to know what it is. And if they would rather lose their earnest money and not take on a major defect, then that's an option also. I mean, that I think you would give them whatever options they wanted to exercise there. So I think we need to be very careful about what advice you're giving to give yourselves a competitive edge or whatever. And same thing, Ingalls, a perfect example. The sellers want 10% earnest money. It's not uncommon in expensive neighborhoods to put up 10% earnest money, although it is not as common as it used to be. But certain geographic areas, River Oaks, Westview, it's not an uncommon request. So I explained to my client, who's the buyer, that it was not an uncommon request, but everything is negotiable. Now, everyone buying a house in Southgate for $2 million has friends that are in Southgate in $2 million houses, and they have friends that buy houses. Everyone has friends. So he immediately reached out to 10 of his coworkers and asked them if they put up 10% earnest money on any $2 million house. He couldn't find anyone that put up 10% earnest money, and he was unwilling to put up 10% earnest money. That's what buyers do also. That doesn't mean that my advice was wrong. It is not uncommon for sellers to request 10% earnest money in wealthy enclaves across America. But if this buyer doesn't wish to put up that additional money, then that offer what you want to offer. I mean, that's what I represent you, and your offer, the seller can request 10% and you can offer 1%. Let's just see how the chips flow. That's at least good dialogue. That's good advice about how it's going. But you have to be very careful about, are we helping our people make sure that they get loan approval? And we are catching this more and more and more, where the wealthier your clients get, the more you're going to see your clients make $50,000 on a salary, and they work at Jeffries Capital, and they have stock options at Amazon or whatever, and they make actually their distribution from stocks is $1 million, and the lender doesn't want to count that, so now they don't qualify for the loan. And they didn't figure that out until they'd already passed the option period and passed all making sure people have final loan approval versus some pre-qualification. The higher the number gets, the more important these things are. Are we really representing the people? And in a hot market, you're looking for every opportunity to give your person an advantage. And maybe you need to make sure that we've done our due diligence before you left their earnest money and all these fees that they're paying at risk or whatever. Same thing, if you're the buyers over here, and we had this scenario yesterday. The highest offer may not be the best offer. Okay, it may or it may not. It's not. We just give advice, and the buyers and the sellers probably need to choose from themselves. We had an offer in the firm. I think one offer was bad. The other offer, of course, is within the firm, and it's for less money, but probably a better offer or whatever. Now, there is a very fine line about who we're representing, because do we make more money if the firm represents both parties? Yes. I mean, clearly we make more money if we represent both parties than if we don't. But what are we giving the best advice? So you have to, it's not uncommon for another agent to file some lawsuit, or be sure the disgruntled agents, there's going to be plenty of disgruntled agents in our sort of atmosphere today, are going to do things that are going to make you uncomfortable. They're going to reach out when their offer wasn't accepted. They're going to reach out to your seller, and they're going to reach out to other agents. They're going to see what's going on. They're not just going to lay low and just assume that nothing happened, especially if they make a good offer. And they every time, at least once a month in this firm, I'm questioned by an agent when something closes and it was less than what they offered for it. So Greenwood King offered, that wasn't accepted. We accept Martha Turner, it closes. The Greenwood King agent calls back immediately and says, but my client offered $950 and we see it closed for $940. Well, yeah, let me send you the inspection report. And after there was $100,000 worth of repairs negotiated, we negotiated down to $940, and it probably would have been reasonable that your people would have done the same thing. So we have to be able to defend it. So they question it in modest times. They're sure as hell going to question it in very extreme times when you're getting 10 and 15 offers for these sort of things all the time.
Bill?
Yep.
I don't mind representing both sides, but in a multiple offer situation, I feel like it looks really suspicious to have, the agent, the listing agent's offer win out of, multiple offers. And I personally
I know it looks that way,
not to do that.
Think of it this way. I mean, if you are uncomfortable, first of all, it goes back to your clients. If your clients would rather you not represent them, that you have to have that conversation in the very beginning when you have a listing, because the scenario might come up. I have the very best listings in the Heights, and I have the best buyers in the Heights, and I am not going to deny my buyers my listings. And I don't think my listings want me to eliminate my pool of 100 buyers that are willing to buy their house. So I have that conversation with my listings early on, and then you have to go back and explain it thoroughly. I sell my listing 1/3 of the time. I honestly do. Now, I'm going to sell my buyer another house. I don't make any more money if he buys Amanda Anhorn's $1.5 million house or my $1.5 million house. I don't make any more money. I'm still going to represent that buyer. I'm going to sell him something. And like I say, would my seller rather me co-op with Amanda or co-op with myself? If they would rather me co-op with Amanda, I'm happy to do it, because I don't make any less money if my client buys someone else, but I don't make any more money. I really don't make any more money. I'm going to represent that buyer on something else if it's not that listing. It is, first of all, your clients need to feel comfortable with it. You need to feel comfortable with being able to do that or not do it, because you certainly don't have to do it if you don't want to. But I can't imagine if you had a buyer that you were working with for 6 months and then you worked on a listing for 6 months, why you wouldn't want your buyer to have the same chance to buy that house than if they were Amanda Anhorn's clients.
I would, of course, but usually when that happens, and I mean, it happened, I had a client and, I gave it to Drew because I first of all, I mean, in that situation, my client wanted to be just represented by me and they didn't want me to represent the buyer. But if it was a multiple offer situation, I think that sometimes it gets a little bit sketchy, because an agent on the other side, whether it's true or not, could say, well, you've been giving your person inside information about what all the other offers are. And
but don't give your person inside information.
I wouldn't, but that could be true if your people won, just because of the way you coach them for any particular deal. Like my people I have a pretty good success rate of winning multiple offers. And I mean, my person could win even without inside information, but it might look that way.
Certain things are always going to look a certain way. It is a fine line, and I understand it's a fine line. And like I say, the first thing we have to think of is when you're the listing agent, your primary responsibility in the beginning is to represent the seller. And if the seller's uncomfortable with it, but I do think you need to describe to the seller up front that this might happen. But I will tell you, as an agent, with 23 years experience, many times I get a listing because I have a lot of buyers. That's why they list with us. And if they want me not to bring those buyers, that defeated their whole purpose of me being the listing agent, to have a large swath of buyers compared to Jonah, who doesn't have a large amount of buyers, right? So, if that is why they singularly chose you over someone else, then you can't eliminate that path of buyers. And you can, yes, maybe you want to give them to another agent or whatever. I understand it's a fine line. There's not one way to do it. And so you'd have to evaluate each circumstance. But I would not initially eliminate my buying pool from my listings, nor would I eliminate them from Boulevard Realty listings. I mean, why would we want to do that? But I mean,
right. I would never eliminate them. I always would show it to them. But at the same time, if there was multiple offers, I might want to.
Those same agents that feel like you screwed them over if you took your own feel the exact same way if Drew represents the buyer. You didn't eliminate their hatred or their accusation that they had inside knowledge. They just assumed you gave the inside knowledge to Drew instead of you doing it directly. So I don't know that you deflected anything. And if something was unethical or done improperly, of course we're just as liable. But I understand if you're not comfortable with it, don't do it. But I think I would practice on getting comfortable with it. I can tell my client, my buyer client, anything that Amanda Anhorn can tell them, and I can never tell them anything else. And that's the way I look at it. I tell people, and that's the way I always think about it. I can tell a buyer anything that any other agent on earth can tell them. And that's the way I look at it. If Amanda Anhorn doesn't know it, then I can't tell it. So I never tell my agents anything more than what I would tell Amanda. There's multiple offers. Submit your highest and best. The seller prefers a lease back period, or whatever it is. Whatever you would tell Amanda, you can tell that buyer. And as long as the sellers understand that, and then the buyers understand they're not at a disadvantage, but they're not necessarily at an advantage over Amanda, other than, you're good at negotiating what you do. I feel like I'm a better buyer's agent than Amanda Anhorn is. Certainly there are knowledge and experience and things that I have that she doesn't have. And so I want my buyers to have that information. And I don't want them to go not have the same information by using Amanda. So, but I understand. I mean, it's a fair point. But I think you just need to learn to get comfortable with it. It is harder. And I think your point is well taken. In a very hot market and multiple offers, it is harder, but it's not any more hard, because when you have a listing that's on 90 days and you bring a buyer, they feel the same thing. They feel like, am I going to get better representation by someone more cutthroat by not being the listing agent? And, sometimes they're going to feel that way also. I can present any offer at any price. Well, I'll do exactly what you tell me to do. Here's my advice. Here's comps. And like I say, I'm working with 30 buyers. I believe many, many, many houses are overpriced today. I believe many of my own listings are overpriced today. But you know what? I didn't make up the price. The seller, I shared my information with the sellers, and I do as those sellers instruct me to do. And then I get paid to defend what it is that they say. But I don't always agree with the pricing structures of my own listings. I have to defend those. Amanda?
I bring that up too, because I fear a lawsuit. I mean, you must, because you represent so many people, you must have a lot of brokers or agents pissed off with you when you win your own listing, right? I mean, that does happen sometimes.
Those scenarios, I'll be honest with you, I do more transactions than anyone, and I've never been sued. But I think it's good communication. Yes, I'm fearful, just like what you said. The more bidding war sort of scenario. Yes, I did not ride on my own 1512 Rutland. I had a client who wanted that house, 1512 Rutland. Look, the roof's old, the bathrooms need remodeled, the pool's old. It was a bidding war. I didn't think it was worth that. But, and we're going to talk about, I think it's fragile. So my 1817 Cortland, we put it to private per seller. I got it under contract with my buyer. My buyer loves that house. My buyer wants that house. When they inspected, he was totally reasonable. Fill some wood floor filler, paint some areas that were unpainted. We're talking about insignificant crap. And the seller said, hell no, I ain't doing anything. I believe we're underselling it. And the buyer got mad and the buyer terminated, okay? The seller raised the price, which is the seller's option to do so. this scenario is another we want to talk about. Happens all the time. My buyer still wants that house. Now the seller will sell it to them for $60,000 more than we were under contract 38 days ago. Okay. 38 days ago, he terminated on the last day of the option period because it didn't feel good. Now, hell, he's there. He's paying the $60,000 extra to buy the house because he's figured out that that's what he wanted. We bid on 10 other houses that he doesn't like. And he might as well just pay the $60,000 more for the one he likes. If he lives there 20 years, it isn't going to be that big a deal. I bring this up because we have this happen all the time. Many sellers are fragile. They feel like they can get more. My Rutland people, that house did not inspect well. Okay. It just doesn't, it's got a stucco problem. It's got a roof problem. It's got a pool problem. It's got an electrical problem. The people only asked for $7,700. He told them to jump off a cliff. He was never going to give them a dime for that house. Never a dime. And they ended up buying it just fine. They got nothing and they're going to buy it, you know? So I think we need to get ready. Some of these sellers are not going to give a dime. They're not going to caulk. They recommended that the air conditioner was too low and it might get mold. He says, I like it cold. He lived there he wasn't going to do anything. And many sellers are not going to do anything. And when you represent, and look, I thought he should have. I advised him to do something, but he didn't want to do it. That's the risk he takes, that we have to give that inspection and pass it off to the next one. And, you're going to have to get ready for this scenario. And if you're the buyer side, you're going to get to buy some houses and people give you nothing. I mean, it isn't going to feel good, but if you want the house, then that's what you're going to have to do from time to time. But I mean, it's a very precarious time that we're in. I do want to just mention these other two because we're going to keep going here. Be careful about putting things in writing and you can counter multiple people in writing sort of thing, and you end up being under contract with more than one people. Be careful of that. Don't ever do that. Make sure that you counter via some email or the rejection of offer and invitation to submit another offer or whatever. Be very careful that you don't get under contract on two things. And you cannot mislead one of these agents in order to make your offer more attractive. A lot of times we say things, oh, my buyers are never going to ask for anything, da, 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 da. They inspect, then they ask for something. That is a form of misleading that agent in order to entice them to take your offer. But now it's no longer true. And things do change, but I think because times are where they are, you have to be conscious of getting sued. You can get sued by a buyer, you can get sued by a seller, you can get sued by another real estate agent. It's a relatively easy concept to sue people these days. And I just need for you to be aware of making sure that you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's and thinking it through. And yes, I think just like what Star is saying, better to err on the side of caution in some of these scenarios. And maybe you do give up. It is frustrating if you have a buyer and they've waited for a very long time and it is your listing that you give up your buyer that you would have made money if they bought Amanda Anhorn's listing. So I don't think you automatically have to give up that deal. But I do think you have to do what's in the best interest of your clients. And in Ivanhoe, that was definitely what the sellers were never going to be happy with you representing both sides. So that scenario was fine. How about other questions over core competency, these sort of common, where we're at in these scenarios? Are there particular questions about competency? It gets us, the things that get us, builders contracts get us all the time. Builders contracts that we don't have the same third-party financing addendum. These things, look, those contracts are written, they're misleading. It often says in two different paragraphs who's paying for the title policy versus, it's not clear. It's very hard to understand some of those contracts, especially if you don't do them a lot and aren't aware of the pitfalls that might come with them. If you face one of those contracts, I'm begging you to please reach out to Rhonda or Brandon or myself or Marianne or someone who can help advise you. And Brandon and Mary Ann and Rhonda will know when it's over their head. They will reach out for additional help. They are very good. Rhonda asks me 10 questions a day to clarify things, because that's the best thing we can possibly do, is verify these scenarios. And like I say, Star and Cynthia and Melissa ask more questions than the rest of the 55 of you combined or whatever, because they're doing more transactions. It's good to run these things by people to verify. So please never be hesitant to ask any questions, or ask a coworker to run things by them from time to time. But we need to make sure that we're not trying to be all things to all people. So any other questions about that? Okie dokie. So I want to stay on this flood thing. We're going to talk about flooding for the rest of your career. If you sell houses in Houston, Texas, you need to be a flooding expert. Continue to study flooding. Every house in Houston, Texas is at risk to some degree of flooding, okay? Forget the 100-year floodplain. I just don't think that is a good indication of your level of risk or whatever. But what you're going to start seeing is new forms. Wendy saw it first. It was Greenwood King that had a form. I thought it was a very good form. So we're in the process of finalizing an additional form that we're going to present to buyers. We can't make every buyer. I would like every buyer to sign it, okay? But I'm a realist. I can't make Greenwood King's buyers sign forms. I can ask them to sign them, but I'm going to give them the notice. And if they don't sign it, I'm going to write on the form, Greenwood King agent Amanda Anhorn advised them not to sign the form. Write that on the form and submit it to back agents so that I have a defense when I'm sued later, which we're going to be sued later, over flooding issues. There's just no doubt in my mind, every real estate agent is going to be tremendously at risk, because it is volatile and it is changing, and it is changing rapidly. And a number of people, a very high number of people, as in hundreds of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of homes are going to be impacted by these changes over the next several years. This is a form, and we're going to still perfect it one more time, but it should be up later today, that we're going to use. Please use it with all of your buyers. It's going to be a form that's required when we represent a buyer. Any buyer in any county nearby, in Harris County, Fort Bend County, Galveston County, it all applies, because this is not just a city of Houston. We have the one form that talks about substantial damage, substantial completion, and building code changes in the 100 and 500-year floodplain. That, I'm hoping you know something about that form. If not, please come to my class or ask me about that later, or we'll bring it up in a second. This has to do with the flood insurance program, okay? The National Flood Insurance Program is changing, and everything that has been done for the last 50 years is thrown out the window, and a new program is totally replacing it, okay? So it is unlike anything that was ever done before. Before, basically, flood insurance was a basis of how close are you to the 100-year floodplain and how high you are. And that's a lovely analysis, but really that is only about 10% of the potential for flooding or flood damage. Flooding comes from a lot of different areas, not just rising bayous in the event of a hurricane. We flood all the time in Houston, Texas. Homes flood every month in Houston, Texas, and we only have hurricanes every 3 to 4 years or whatever. So believe me, houses flood from any number of reasons. A lot of it to do with just basic drainage or construction or topography or height level of those houses. So this form is saying the flood insurance, and this form came from the National Association of Realtors, has the template for the form, okay? Nationwide. This is not just me making this stuff up. This is NAR coming up with a form. Greenwood King has a form already. I'm assuming most major forms are probably going to have something similar. You can run them by me, but they're all going to say, some of them are more generic. I am way more specific with ours than the generic version of them, but I pulled this language from NAR's form, but I made it more particular. Boulevard Realty strongly recommends flood insurance for almost every home. In most flood events over the last decade, the majority of homes that flooded were not in the floodplain. Remember, almost 65% of homes that flood are not in the 100 or the 500-year floodplain. 65% of the homes that flood over the last decade were not in the 100 or 500 year floodplain. The 100 and 500 year floodplain are not an accurate reflection of flood risk. Okay, I don't know how to say it any more direct than that. That is not an indication of flood risk. Okay, the flood insurance program is available, but there are changes coming to that program. And I'm taking this language directly from the NAR now, that in some cases will rise by a substantial amount over the premiums that have previously been charged for flood insurance on a property. An example is someone outside the 100-year floodplain that's only paying $500, yet 65% of the homes that flood are not in the floodplain. So just keep in mind, liberal Democrat here, the people paying the cheapest receive the most return on the insurance program. Okay, doesn't seem like a logical explanation to pay in $500 per person, and the program itself loses $1 trillion a year from the weakest payers, the people that pay the least. Okay, the program is screwed. That program doesn't work fiscally for anyone, whatever. As a result, do not rely on premiums paid for flood insurance on a property previously as an indication of the premiums that will apply in the future. It's no indication because it's cheap today, it's going to be cheap in the future. In reality, it's likely to be significantly higher. It says substantially higher here for many people. Now, many people who are overpaying in the 100 and 500 year floodplains may pay less. Okay, so some people will pay less and some people will pay more based on the risk factor. And the risk has to do with the street, the age of the drain, the size of the drain, where it is in relationship to so many other things. So do not think that your current flood premium, $500 or $5,000, is anyway going to be a reflection in the future. And not only is the flood insurance program changing, but of course, the maps are changing. Now, we've created our own little website here on our website that will lead them to these two websites, Risk Rating 2.0, which explains the flood insurance program in detail, and the maps at Map Next at Harris County. There are two different things happening simultaneously. But it's we need buyers to understand, A, please get flood insurance. B, don't assume by any means that whatever the current premium is an indication of the future premium. And many people, I want to be clear, many people are going to pay significantly more, especially when you go to buy the new home. Now, there is a rule. I want to be clear that we're, if you're in a floodplain and the premium rises significantly, which the premium is going to rise significantly, existing homeowners are going to be capped at 18% increase a year. So if you're paying $1,000 and you should be paying $10,000, they're just going to raise you 18% a year until you get to what it is that you're supposed to be paying. So existing people are probably not going to see an immediate problem. I mean, 18% is a lot of money, but from 1,000 to 1,180 ain't going to break the bank. It's just when it goes 18%, for 10 or 15 years. It's the new people that do not have flood insurance that are soon going to be required to get flood insurance because you're going to be mapped in a floodplain or at a high risk area and you're going to need it and you didn't know that you needed it. Or B, when the grandfathering of a new purchase goes away and then the guy paying $1,000 and the new guy is going to get to pay $10,000. And when the premiums come out, guys, it isn't going to take rocket scientists for us to figure out the value of many houses is going to be reduced significantly. People will no longer be able to afford the house. It's much like interest rates. If interest rates are 10%, the price of houses go down because people can't afford the house. They can't afford the $1 million house. They can only afford the $600,000 house. Rising interest rates reduce pricing for houses. It's an easy mathematical formula. Rising flood insurance premiums reduce the value of houses and will significantly reduce the value of housings in many neighborhoods unless the housing stock is out of risk, which means higher, which there are ways to get them higher. I need for you to thoroughly to be able to explain flooding in Houston, Harris County, Fort Bend County, Montgomery County, all of these sort of things. And these rules are, I mean, they're fast approaching. The new insurance program is set to begin October 1. It is not that far away. We are in April here. And it could be delayed again. I mean, it's been delayed from time to time, but I mean, it's out there and it's pretty apparent that the program is changing. How fast the increase will be, I mean, it's a little unclear. You can always refer them to some insurance agent. The insurance agents don't like to discuss this because they're in the habit of selling insurance. They're not in the habit of educating people. We're in the habit of having to educate people about deed restrictions, regulations, minimum lot size, and this is just one more thing. So are we questions about this form?
Bill, I have a different question though.
Okay.
I have a client that I'm starting to work with, some buyers, and they bought their house through a Redfin agent.
Okay.
And when they bought the house, it's over on 27th Street. It's in actually, there's this tiny little sliver that runs through 27th that's in the 100-year floodplain.
Yep.
And they bought this house thinking that they were going to fix it up. It's kind of a really cool house, but the foundation is equal to the ground. I mean, it is just, flat on the ground. And when they went to get permitting from the city,
You have to raise it 2 feet above the 500-year floodplain.
Yeah. And, they were devastated because they thought that they could fix this up. And I know we have that form for the remodel in a floodplain.
303, I helped write that form. It's yes. Are we clear what that says?
Yeah. But that's like for a second. I kind of am clear on that, but that's really for like a second remodel. If they remodeled it the first time, they won't pay the second time. This house is never flooded, but they're still not allowed to build. Remodel.
That's right. If you're in the 100 or the 500-year floodplain, we regulate in the city of Houston. Now, this is a city rule that's now been adopted basically throughout the county. And to receive any federal funding, which is the bond money, now every entity had to adopt this rule. So Bel Air and Westview and all these are forced to adopt the same deal. So we're going to regulate the 100 and the 500 exactly the same. So now that's 33% of all geography in the whole city. And if you're in those areas, 100 or 500, and you do any addition, you spend money on that house, then you're going to have to raise it out of harm's way. The philosophy of the city is that let's not let people spend money on a house that we think has a high probability of flooding in the next 50 years. Doesn't have to flood today. Maybe have never flooded before, Jerry. I don't care if it never flooded before. Doesn't have anything to do with that. With climate change and the intensity and the way the topography is changing and the way that the drainage is working, houses that have never flooded before are going to soon be flooding. And so to keep them from spending $80,000 on a kitchen remodel that then floods, we want them first to raise the house out of harm's way. So yeah, it's going to catch people not only in the 100, but we regulate the floodplain, the permitting department, every house in my class, every house in the 100 and the 500-year floodplain today has a blanket on it at the permitting department, every address, so that when the water heater goes out and the plumber pulls a permit for the water heater, it's flagged at this permitting department. Now we've complicated every permit in the 100 and 500-year floodplain. They must go and release that permit for the water heater, which they can do, but then they will put on against that house the value of a water heater, $2,800 will go against its basis. So when they go and pull a permit for a garage, $20,000, they're going to plug in that number. And then they go and pull a permit for the kitchen, $50,000. And that's more than 50. Now we're spent more than 50% of the improved value, because the improved value was only $100,000 to begin with. They will never let them do that until they raise the house out of harm's way. So I think every house in the 100 and the 500-year floodplain for sure needs to know how. That's why we refer you back to that deal. Go see where they're at in the floodplain maps in the 500. We really just care about the 500-year base flood elevation, and the houses need to be 2 feet above that. And I'm praying 60 of you are on here. I'm really only looking at Max, Massing, and Martha and Jonah at the moment. Every one of those houses not 2 feet above the 500-year base flood elevation is significantly at risk. They are significantly at risk of having insurance premiums they no longer can afford. They are significantly at risk at flooding in the future. They are significantly at risk of being forced to be raised or torn down. Did you hear what I said? That is 500,000 houses. 500,000 houses that I've calculated that are at significant risk unless they are 2 feet above the 500-year base flood elevation. Start looking at every house and ensure that they're 2 feet above the base flood, the 500-year base flood elevation. I don't know. I don't want to be pessimistic about it. I could be wrong, but I'm telling you, they are at risk. I don't know exactly what the risk is, but they're at risk of the flood insurance premium going up significantly. They're at risk of flooding, and they're at risk of being forced to be raised. And the average cost of raising a house is $250,000. So, I mean, some of these houses, they're not going to spend $250,000 to raise the house. It's just cheaper to tear the house down, which in effect is what the government's doing. That is the city replacing housing stock that is at risk with housing stock that is not at risk. I don't know how to be any blunter about the public policy. We have hundreds of thousands of houses that have repetitively flooded. Flood, get insurance money, flood, get insurance money, flood, get insurance money, flood, get insurance money. And doesn't seem to make any sense to let people do that. And the way of the intensity and the drainage pattern and the way it is, more and more houses that have never flooded before are going to flood.
Hey, Bill,
Yep.
Are you putting that form in zip form?
We are, yes.
Yeah.
It's not there yet, but it should be there by the end of the day.
There is one for the HOA, Houston Association of Realtors one.
That one, yes, is for people in the 100 and the 500-year floodplain. That is what that form, although I begged them to make it go to everyone, but it is a form.
Yeah.
Because that is talking about what I just talked about.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Changes and regulations with regards to permits, like Star was mentioning, because some people, that's the first they're going to hear about it. Secondly, what this form is really doing is telling them not the problem with permitting, it's the problem with the flood insurance programs.
Right.
Ready?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The flood insurance program for every buyer in these counties, Harris County, Fort Bend County, Galveston County, Waller County, and Harris County, are fixing to change. They need to be aware of the change.
Right.
The program itself is changing, the maps themselves are changing.
Okay.
Bill, shouldn't have that Redfin realtors have known that, that they would have problems at base level? Like,
I would sue the Redfin agent. If I were them, I would sue. Redfin is a $1 billion company. I would sue them. That's what I'm not in the habit of telling people to sue, but I think until we get these agents out of, there are unethical agents and there are uninformed agents. I want to be clear. I am talking to a very top agent who's showing in the Heights, who's not in our firm, and she doesn't know anything about historic districts, and you shouldn't be able to show in these areas if you don't understand about historic districts. They're not competent. They have no core competency understanding historic districts. They should stay out of historic districts or seek the advice of someone. Yes, this Redfin agent needs to be able to explain Form 303, especially in the 100-year floodplain, for God's sake. But of course, you get it in the 500-year floodplain, which is not catching everyone because not everyone knows they're in the 500-year floodplain. You're in the 100-year floodplain because the insurance program tells you that today. The problem is we're not telling the people in the 500-year floodplain that they're in the 500 and that the 500 is soon going to be the 100. And people close to the 500 are going to be in some floodplain they're not used to being in also. So just because you're not in the 100 and 500 today doesn't mean you're not going to be in one relatively soon. Relative is could be 2 years from now. But yeah, I think everyone needs to think they're in the floodplain. I think everyone needs to know how high they are in that floodplain. We're going to build plenty of houses high. It's a city that always floods, always going to flood. I'm building in the floodplain. I'm not building at 500 plus 2, though. I'm building higher than 500 plus 2 because I'm not going to build the minimum standard because you know what? I'm a smart guy. I think the standard's going to go up even higher, and I don't want my insurance program premium to be high. So is it worth it to spend a little more to get another half a foot high? Sure it is. And that doesn't mean my house that I'm building is relatively high, but it doesn't mean it's 6 feet up in the air. My lot is very high. So my basic house at the 500-year base flood elevation plus 3 feet is only about 24 inches above the grade that the dirt is now. So, I mean, I'm not even building a pier and beam house. I'm building a slab house in that deal. I'm not building, you don't have to build 6 feet up in the air. And so I think there's a misunderstanding about your base flood elevation and how high you're. Now, you very well could be. There's certainly, we see houses that have to be built up 4 or 5 feet up in the air. And I want to be clear about the Meyerland, Braze, Wood area. Many of those houses are built higher than the requirement because if you're at 5 feet high in the air, there's nothing you can do there. If you go ahead and make it 9 feet up in the air, you can walk underneath there. You can play shuffleboard underneath there. You can store your Christmas tree there, or you might be able to park your car there. So, I mean, some of them built higher than was necessary because they wanted to utilize the space for storage or parking or something underneath. But I need us all to understand a lot about flooding. It is the number one thing, the number one value added proposition that I think we at our firm can provide. I think we know it more than other people. We have to explain it to the other side the majority of the time. But yes, I think people are going to use agents that are unethical or that are uninformed, and it's going to cost people money. I don't want to be one of those agents. So, and there is a fine line, and don't think I don't lay awake at night. We represent an equal number of sellers that have this problem. So, I mean, this is an ethical dilemma that you're going to have. I am selling 4022 Merrick. My client is an ethical person. We are fearful of the price of flood insurance for that house in the future. My client will only sell to someone who will tear it down. He will not sell. And we have had 100 people try to buy the house that just want to use it as an investment house and continue to rent it out. And you're going to rent it out to people who are going to flood. My client can't sleep at night thinking about that. He does not want to worry about that 10 years from now. He's only selling to someone who will tear down. But I want to be clear, we're not stupid financial people. We're trying to sell ours before the market's flooded with 500 other houses that are going to be forced to sell. So I think the value of houses in that area at around 4022 Merrick, if they're an old house, I think the value is going to go down significantly. Significantly is hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you flood the market with 500 houses in a particular subdivision, then of course the value of them is going to go down. So we're trying to sell in a hurry before the flood insurance premium goes up such that everyone will know about it. Because when they get their flood insurance premium, they're going to know. Right now, I'm educating you well in advance. Nobody recognizes that this is coming, that it's been talked about for years. But yeah, when it comes, it's going to hurt the value of a number of properties. It's going to hurt the value of Gary Jagger's new potential listing, wherever that was over there, ITC Chester. It's going to lower the value of these houses. So sell them in a hurry. But I do think you've got to be careful about who we're selling them to, and are those people informed? And there's, like I say, there's a fine line when you go to represent that seller, and you're telling the buyer of this risk. Our primary fiduciary responsibility is to the seller, but we do have an ethical responsibility to not mislead or to not inform people of inherent risk. And that's why and I'm about as honest as I can be. We ain't going to get some listings. Some people are not going to list with us because we're going to tell the buyer of this situation right here, and they're going to go list with Redfin, and Redfin isn't going to tell somebody the truth, and there's going to be buyers that get screwed. And I hope
Bill,
they do Redfin. Yep.
Bill, sorry to interrupt. The FEMA will be changing, or the new program will be out October 1st as dictated by FEMA, correct?
Well, yes, FEMA rules the National Flood Insurance Program. So yes, the answer is yes. This is a FEMA-driven program of the National Flood Insurance Program.
Okay. And is there a draft or is there any info out before October 1?
Risk Rating 2.0. You just Google Risk Rating 2.0. We have in our back agent, we have these websites, but it's referenced in this form. When you click on this Boulevard flooding, it takes you to two websites. Risk Rating 2.0, which is the flood insurance program. So that's changing, and it has a pretty good job of explaining. It's pretty blunt. And then there is the maps that are also changing, which is in Harris County called Map Next. So it tells you how the maps are going to be calculated and the timeline for implementation of new maps. So about 2,500 miles of Harris County had never been mapped before. And it's pretty evident because 65% of the houses are not in the floodplain. So you're going to get new maps, more accurate maps. You're going to use Atlas 14, which is using 18 inches of water versus what we used before, which is 12 inches of water over a period of time. So you can imagine that the volume intensified. So you've got new Atlas 14 numbers and a new topography. And Map Next explains thoroughly how they're doing it. And that's a local program. Houston leads the nation in mapping, Map Next. At the same time, the flood insurance program nationwide is changing. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, and so those websites, we had just been putting them out. We've been just kind of sending people the websites. This form is going to try and simplify so that it's explaining those two things. It is hard to understand. I mean, it is hard to understand. But yeah, you got two things going on there: maps and flood insurance program.
Okay.
Okay, questions about this disclosure. You cannot make Greenwood Kings buyers sign this. I mean, I get it. We're going to try. We're going to try, but we can make our buyers. Okay? If we represent a buyer anywhere, it doesn't matter if it's in Galveston County, Fort Bend County, Cypress, doesn't have to be the 100-year floodplain, doesn't have to be the 500-year floodplain, doesn't matter, because we're still advising every one of those people to evaluate their risk and consider flood insurance, okay? So
even if they're paying cash, don't you think, Bill? Even if they're, because of the way I understand it now, it's only if you're financing a home that you must have flood insurance. But if a buyer is paying cash, they should still strongly consider flood insurance, even though they're not required to have it.
Absolutely, because we believe now if they get a survey and an elevation certificate in my other, so if they get an elevation certificate and they're 3 feet above the 500-year base flood elevation, we truly believe their risk to be very, 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 very low. Well, then maybe they don't want to get flood insurance. I mean, but we want to advise them to get educated on it. Yes, right. And I do think the majority of people need flood insurance.
Yeah,
I believe that they do. And remember, in Harvey, 83% of the people did not have flood insurance. And 1 year after Harvey, even less than that had flood insurance. Even the flooded houses that had flood insurance, they no longer kept their flood insurance up or whatever. And I mean, and then in Risk Rating 2.0, it's going to tell you these. So let's go this way. If you buy in the 100-year floodplain today, and you choose not to get flood insurance, and I don't want to get into the weeds of this deal, but if you have the chance to buy it and a hurricane and you do not buy it, you will never be given the opportunity to buy flood insurance for that location ever again. You're given a chance to buy it.
Oh, wow. And
let's say it floods and you want flood insurance in the future. If you did not have flood insurance after October 1, and they've already sent these letters out to people who had flood insurance and no longer have flood insurance. They've already been notified. If you were given the chance and you don't buy it, your home will never qualify for flood insurance again. Okay. Why would you, when it would be $500 if you just bought the damn thing, why would you buy the flood insurance? But I don't want to get, I mean, that's an example of the flood insurance program changing. They're giving people these chances, and because they just can't, it's one of these things, the minute the hurricane season is announced, then people get flood insurance, but then they cancel it 3 months later. And the program doesn't work that way. So give them the chance and you choose not to, you may not ever get the chance again. But that's all in risk rating 2.0.
So do we need to kind of educate our homeowner clients about having it in place by October 1st if they don't have it, or just leave it? Yeah. I don't know.
Yes, I think we should. Because you're going to be able to limit the potential increase to the 18%, because I mean, that's going to be a huge saving factor for many, 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 many people. Yes, you want to get flood insurance before October 1, because after October 1, it's going to be a whole different ball game. So yeah, I definitely think you want it. We want them to get it now, but yeah, we need everyone to consider it, and then be aware of these things. Okie dokie, how we doing? We got a little more to talk about today. So yeah, I do want to recognize and introduce Gina Abbott, who's a new agent here. Gina comes to us. She's a friend of Melissa. She used to work for the Raina Group. So welcome, Gina. Thank you for being on your first little Boulevard Zoom here. Someday we will meet again in person. I want to explain one new program that we have that is starting almost immediately. I need you to be aware about it. B, it costs you nothing. The firm assumed all of this cost, but I think it's going to be a very, very, very good feature for you as agents, and especially for the sellers. When this goes into play, which is almost immediately, every time you get a listing, you are automatically going to get some digital ads. And these ads are created for you. You don't have to do anything. And they're designed to go and hit anything close to your seller. So we're trying to reach your seller, so the seller sees that you're doing something. And then B, we're reaching buyers. This is a short 3-minute little presentation of what happened. You don't have to do anything other than enter the home into the multiple listing service. When you enter it on HAR, this program sends them out to targeted areas. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to try my best to explain this.
Hi, I'm Kelsey, your digital marketing specialist, and I'm here to talk to you about our online marketing strategy and how we plan to advertise and market your home. After listing your home with us, a custom digital advertisement will be created for your listing. This ad will be shown thousands of times to home buyers surrounding your property. Your home will be shown on Facebook and Instagram, as well as major websites like the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, on both desktops and in mobile apps. It will specifically target people looking at listings online, using online mortgage calculators, and researching moving companies. If someone sees your listing on our website, they'll also be followed around with your home's ad. Just like Amazon might follow you around with that pair of shoes you were just looking at, we'll follow home buyers with your property, keeping your home in front of potential buyers wherever they go online. Finally, you'll receive a daily report showing how your home's ad is performing. You'll also receive a link to share on your social networks, letting your friends and family help spread the word about your listing. Feel confident that your home is in the best hands online and off, and list your home with us. We will truly work for you to get your home sold.
Looking for your home can be exciting and overwhelming. Online tools and cutting-edge apps can inspire your search and inform your first steps. But there's no replacing the expertise and understanding you'll get from an experienced real estate agent. From timing tips to offer negotiations, you need a partner you can trust.
Buying a home means dealing with a lot of doors. Open doors, closed doors, doors to legal offices and inspectors, doors to a lot of people you didn't even know you needed. Not to mention all the front doors you walk through. But how do you know which door is best for you? That's why you need this Better Homes and Gardens real estate agent. This agent understands which doors to open and which to leave closed. But most importantly, they know how to find the right door for you. the front door to your home.
The fact that it's something that's turnkey, it's automated, that it's going to happen with every listing, really our job is just to make sure that the realtor understands it, sees how it's going to benefit the seller, and then is able to communicate that to the seller so that they know exactly what they're getting. One of the great things about the product is that it does its job, but the other part is that the realtor has confidence that they can explain to a potential seller who they'd be working with what they're going to get and knowing that it's going to deliver. That's a big deal, to know that you can tell someone you've got a product that will actually deliver. That's a differentiator.
My favorite part of Adwerx is that it really is turnkey for the agents. I mean, really, there is not a lot they have to do. We advertise all of their listings on the platform. The back-end system is very easy for them to navigate. If they want to get the reporting, the data, they can simply log into the website and get that information. In addition, they can add additional campaigns via zip code. They can also upload their sphere. So I really, really strongly believe in Adwerx. I think it is a great tool, and I think the team on their end has been really great to work with.
I think that's the end of our little video. So we're just kind of getting started with this. And we'll have more examples for you in the coming days or whatever, but it's just another tool. I mean, we've been trying to find ways digitally that we can reach a greater amount of buyers. I mean, that's really what we're trying to do, is reach the buyers and then have something that we can show the sellers that we're doing. This thing, it automatically creates these for you. So for the listing agent, you don't really have to do anything. We're literally targeting where your sellers would be looking. If they look on the sports for the Baylor Houston game, or they're looking at the weather, or they're looking at, any number of different things, it's kind of targeting. It's just literally, if I Google search, the other day I was telling people at the Planning Commission, we had an example of we were talking about a canopy on Chick-fil-A's, okay? We were adding a canopy, which they needed a variance. The minute we started talking about Chick-fil-A and the canopy, I swear to God, on Facebook, it had photos of Chick-fil-A people who had like space suits on it because they didn't have a canopy. And so these were like their built-in body suits where their iPad was covered in the plastic or whatever. I mean, look, Big Brother's watching. Alexa's over here listening to everything that I'm saying. And this is just the way of the future. And if we need to find a way to get in touch with these buyers and demonstrate to the sellers that we are digitally doing something beyond what you were already doing. These ads go out to the New York Times, they go to Hula, they go to Amazon, they go to wherever. Of course, we are really trying to target a lot of this digital stuff. We've been marketing for the last 3 or 4 months digitally through Houston Modern Luxury, which is just targeting luxury buyers. But of course, we're also exploring different ideas through Paper City and the Chronicle and all of these sort of things to reach people, who are in the home buying market. I think this is going to be very easy for you. If you just don't want to do it, I suppose there's some way to opt out. Let us demonstrate over time to you how this is going to work. And then, of course, they email you daily kind of where it's going, the 2,000 hits or 100 hits. And then you can take it and put it on your Facebook if you want to, or if you don't have to, whatever. But it's a way to market digitally these homes that we have listed. We still have to work on ways that we can help agents who don't have a listing. So don't think I'm not still equally working on things that I can do, because we're not great at lead generation. I mean, I say this time and time and time again. So we have to find a way to generate some leads for people without listings. But at least this is giving us something definitive to show the sellers and an attempt to try and reach more of the buying public digitally than just through HAR.com or Zillow or something. So
is this just houses for sale or leases also?
I think we're just limiting it to the houses. Thomas, do you want to weigh in there, or do we need to get back on that?
Any listing that we have, leases, the only thing that they recommend not doing it with is if you have a lot, like if you have a large lot or something like that, a vacant lot, but leases and homes for sale.
Okay. All right. Well, that answers that question. So let us show you some more of these. I just wanted you to, I'm just kind of teasing you a little bit of something new that's coming down. No cost to you whatsoever. Definitely a cost to me. But I do think it's the way. We're having to find some way to compete with the Compasses of the world, and this is just another way that we're having to compete with them. So it is the way that people are finding houses these days.
Bill, I have a question. This is Brad. Is this going out to current listings that we have right now, or is this only going to new ones as they come up?
Thomas, where did we land on that one?
So the portal is being set up, and it will be about 6 to 8 weeks before it's like officially up and running on everything. But I'll get clarification for whether or not it's going to go retroactively to listings we currently have. I believe it will by the time that the portal is up and running. But so I'll have an answer for you soon.
6 to 8 weeks away.
It's 6 to 8 weeks to get the portal up and running, ready to go. And then from there, everything will be running automatically and seamlessly so that you won't have to do anything. But I will find out for you whether or not everything that is currently listed at the time the portal goes up will be retroactively advertised for you.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, can I just get a clarification on that?
Yep.
I'm going after a listing tonight. Can I mention this as a possible advertising for both?
Absolutely. We can send you that link. You can show them the commercials or whatever, and so there's the commercial of the houses and there's the commercial for the agent, because we're trying to brand the agents also. So I believe they're going to get some commercials like the last ones that we saw were really just branding the agent, right, Thomas?
Yes, though we get 2 commercials for us to use however we want. If you as an agent want to individually brand yourself with a commercial like that to stream, that does have a cost. I believe it's about $300 to run an individual commercial. If you would like to do something like that, you can absolutely do that. All the listing ads and everything like that, the Instagram, the website browsing, and Facebook posts, those are all free and automatic for you.
We'll just explore the others about. Let's just get going. I think we just have to get started and see how it works. But yes, I think, Brooke, you can start telling people. We haven't done a very good job of explaining what we're doing with Houston Modern Luxury, Thomas, either. We probably need to update the agents and the listings about what it is that we're doing there.
Absolutely. I can get a presentation going for that and show it to you guys to let you know exactly what we do with Houston Modern Luxury and exactly what we're going to do with Adwerx this upcoming year.
So maybe next Tuesday we'll just keep adding to this presentation.
Can do.
Okay, perfect. Okay, how about questions, comments about the marketplace? It's pretty peppy out there.
Hey, Bill, when do the updated premiums come out, flood premiums?
October 1. October 1. Don't think that, it's a very controversial deal. Honestly, you got, what is Schumer? He's the chairman of the House, or what's his real title, Jonah, whatever, Charles Schumer. He's basically saying everyone in New York's insurance premiums are going to go up. And the reality of it is, yes, New York's never been more at risk for flooding than ever before. And they built too damn close to the coast. And the insurance premiums are going to go up in New York and Florida and Texas. We're disproportionately not paying enough. So it isn't going to be pretty. That's why I think they put in the 18% cap for existing homeowners. That's not worrying me quite as much as is when we sell a house and the insurance premium isn't grandfathered. That's where it's going to get us. Or people who just don't have the insurance, and when the map hits them and you don't have insurance and all of a sudden you're in the floodplain, or like say something comes up and you want flood insurance and you didn't take advantage of the program when you had it, there's going to be a number of gotchas if we're not careful. But October 1 is when the program goes.
Question, Bill.
Yep.
So aside from the insurance, but in relationship to the city permitting issues or situation with like the 500 becoming the 100, 1 year 100 becoming 25, when does that all go into effect?
So that's what Map Next is about. And there's a timeline where the maps come out and we're going to see what they are. And then there's a comment period for like 6 months. So the reality of it is those new map effective date is probably somewhere in early 2023.
Okay.
The problem that I see is that when they kick out the maps, let's just say you're not in the floodplain or whatever, Lindale, let's just take Lindale and let's pretend it's not in the floodplain. And all of a sudden the map comes out that's not effective yet, but is going to be effective, February 1 of 2023, but they put the map out March of 2022. Aren't we all going to be looking at those maps and juggling something in advance? I mean, they're going to tell you, they're going to put the map out there relatively quickly. And then they go into effect in 23. But the timeline is on Map Next, on that link that we have. Both in Back Agent, we've had it there for a while. So, I mean, I think people need to know areas that have never been mapped are soon going to be mapped, and you're mapping differently. So it does a very good, the video is very good of explaining. We used to just kind of map rising water in a bayou, there's a map. Now throw that whole thought away and start over with how you're going to map. And it's significantly different. So your proximity to the bayou is about 10%. So houses that have never been in any sort of flood map risk are going to be in an area that's higher risk. And we know that because they continually have 65% of the houses that are not in the floodplain. So I mean, you just can imagine if you really look at where it floods and you look at where the maps are, you're going, there's a total disconnect here. I mean, and we have a map in my class, blue's the floodplain and yellow's where they flood, and they're not remotely related to one another. So surely we're going to get these houses in yellow that flood in a high risk area. That's why I am very, 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 very nervous about even saying the word, you're not in the 100 or 500 year floodplain yet. Yet needs to be and I really just wish the whole damn county was in the 100 year floodplain. I think it'd just make all of our life easier, because I really, in reality, believe it is. They just haven't mapped it accurately. But we need to assume that you're in the 100 year floodplain. Now, if you're 8 feet up in the air or your base flood elevation is at 500 plus 2, then you're going to be perfectly fine. I mean, I think the average right now, so of course, White Oak and Burn and Ridge and a couple of those little streets are in the floodplain. But yeah, believe me, I believe the house across the street from the office, which is at the corner of Omar and Studewood, is a high-risk house of flooding, and I know that because I watched the water rise last summer during the rain when it raised over the curb and started going into that garage. That house is too low and is at risk of flooding, and it's not anywhere in the 100 or 500 year floodplain, but it doesn't mean that it's not at risk. I swear to God, those new L&B and Aspire houses that are at the corner of Watson and Balin are too low. When I am standing in my car and I'm looking down at their front door, the water's going to rise over the curb in almost every instance in the city of Houston. The water's going to rise over the curb. When it rises over the curb, what's going to happen? If your house is low, the water's going to get into your house. Sometimes it gets into the house from the backyard. The backyard water has nowhere to go because you have obstructed its ability to get to the front yard to the drain. And so when it rises 12 inches in your backyard, where do you think the water's going? It's going in your back door if your house is a slab on grade. And I mean, they're taking all of those sort of things into consideration, not just water rising from a bayou in a hurricane. So that's what you got to think about, a lot of different scenarios. And I think they have plenty of data to show it, because we know where the houses flood. There's the information is out there. You can see where they repeatedly flood. So you can see where the claims are. So wouldn't you, if a neighborhood that's not in the 100 or 500 year floodplain has 500 houses and 400 of them have flood insurance claims over the last decade, why are we going to put that subdivision in the high risk rating? Of course you are. I don't even care how far you are from the bayou. That subdivision is just too low and doesn't drain very well and is at risk of flooding. And their flood, and this is, just morally, this is where we have done everyone a disservice. We have not told them, because it's not the 100 year floodplain, so we don't tell them the risk of flooding. and we keep the flood insurance so low, so then we haven't identified the risk. If the flood insurance is $18,000 a year on a house, the realtor is going to say, that house is high risk. Then you're going to tell the consumer. Then the consumer knows it's high risk. When we say the flood insurance premium is $497, the assumption is that the risk is low. And that is a false assumption. That has nothing. And you see what we're saying? We've artificially put consumers in harm's way by not accurately telling them of the level of their risk, because we only really focused on the stupid 100-year floodplain because that's the only area that flood insurance was required. And again, if you pay cash, you're not even paying it. And there are houses in the 100-year floodplain that should be paying less, but there's lots of houses that should be paying more. It's a very complicated topic, but I think I would get in the habit of evaluating the risk of every house. And the way to know that is give me the elevation certificate and tell me what the 500-year base flood elevation +2 is. That's really what you need to know.
When you order a new survey as the buyer's rep, is it automatically assumed? Do you automatically get an elevation certificate? Because I always ask for both.
Well, flaw there too. Stupid. But you get one in the 100-year floodplain, but that's measuring the 100-year base flood elevation, and the city of Houston could care less about that. That number is irrelevant. So if you go to get anything like your permit over there on whatever house we were just talking about, you have to have the 500-year base flood elevation and then be a +2. So they must tell us the 500-year base flood elevation on every house. And you can, like I say, you can get that number on every house in the world, okay? There is a base flood elevation in Iowa or in Indiana or South Dakota or Cyprus or Lake Livingston. So yes, we really should be getting, as a best practice, an elevation certificate on every house, and we must measure the 500-year base flood elevation. Now to measure the 500 costs $0. I mean, that doesn't cost anything. The elevation certificate itself does cost $400 to $500, so that's an additional cost but it's easier to find when you're buying a house than 2 years later when you need it for some purpose of a permit or something, or when the insurance program changes and the map changes and you don't have your elevation certificate. You're going to have to go get one, and you're going to get in line with 500,000 other people who need one, and it's called surge pricing. Then the cost of your elevation certificate is going to be $1,500, and you may pay an inflated insurance cost until you get it. So I'm just advising people to go get it now. It just seems so much easier if we would just do this now. If you're 6 feet up in the air, you may not need it, but you're going to need it. See, if the map changes and you're now in a high risk rated area, you're going to need it, and instead of more to get later.
I mean, you need it to get flood insurance.
You need it to get flood insurance. Yeah, absolutely you do. But right now they're measuring the wrong thing. They're measuring the 100-year base flood elevation, and soon you're going to need for regulatory purposes, you're going to need the 500-year base flood elevation. We can have another class about this next week if we need to, but if you don't understand, flag me and let me know. We'll have I can have a 10-person class or a 20-person class, I'm going to start teaching my 3-hour class again soon. But believe me, every day I have agents from across the city ask me questions about a particular house, which is a lovely problem to have. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Thank 44 people for being here today. I
have one more. Sorry. The whole option period, the option fee and the earnest money together. One is within 3 days and one is business days. One doesn't include business days. How do we do that?
They're all business days now. They're all business days.
Oh, so the option period is also.
Yes,
okay. So, okay.
For the fee, I'm sorry.
Yes, I meant the fee. Sorry.
The fee, because it's going to the title company and they can't receipt it on Saturday, Sunday, or a holiday that they're not working on.
Right. So Good Friday.
Period itself started back when so you have an effective date of Wednesday. And Thursday was the next day, but Friday was Good Friday and the title company didn't open, and Saturday they weren't open, and Sunday they weren't open. So they receipted it on Monday. So they still had 3 days, the Thursday and the Monday and the Tuesday, to receipt it. But your option period still started on the Wednesday.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
The money, the option fee and the earnest money date and deadline and is the same.
Okay.
So business days for the calculation, and like I say, business, they're closed on whatever holiday that might be, then they're closed.
I owe an apology then. Okay.
Ready? It's confusing. I mean, it is confusing. Okie dokie. All right. These are great conversations. Thank you all very much. I think we can meet again Thursday, but I don't know that we'll have any topics. We'll just have general conversation. Then I'll try and have topics again next Tuesday for everyone. So thank you so much for being here. Have a great day.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.